and evil will rise.
Released in 2013, The Conjuring starring Patrick Wilson and Vera Farmiga is about two paranormal investigators, Ed Warren and his wife Lorraine, and their investigation of a family that was supposedly terrorized by a dark presence when they moved into a Rhode Island farmhouse in the 1970s. The film was promoted heavily as being based on a true story prior to its release. Since the film's release, some viewers have called into question the veracity of the accounts that were detailed on the silver screen. Ed Warren died in 2006 and his 86-year-old wife was unavailable for comment. But HuffPost did find someone familiar with the pair. Tony Spurra, director of the New England Society for Psychic Research, an organization founded by the Warrens in 1952, said the film is about as real as it gets. The movie is very close to the actual events that traumatized the family, Spurra said. Banging sounds, raping noises, ghostly images, and the presence of the witch were all occurrences that actually transpired in that house. Spurra also said the depictions of the Warrens were spot on and commented that Farmiga's performance left them slack-jawed.
You have a lot of spirits in here, but there's one that I'm most worried about.
Famed film critic Roger Ebert called The Exorcism of Emily Rose an intriguing and perplexing movie. The 2005 film follows the trial of Father Richard Moore, a priest played by actor Tom Wilkinson, who is charged with negligent homicide in the death of Emily Rose. The young girl supposedly died as a result of a failed exorcism. According to Brian Dunning, a writer who hosts the weekly podcast Skeptoid, there is some real-world DNA inside the cinematic feature. The story is based on the 1976 case of German girl Anneliese Michel, who died of dehydration and starvation after months of intensive exorcism activity by two Catholic priests. Anneliese had been undergoing psychiatric treatment for many years, and today we believe she suffered from both schizophrenia and dissociative identity disorder, Dunning told HuffPost. Dunning said Michelle's parents and the two priests were ultimately found guilty of manslaughter, and the case inspired some members of the Catholic Church to reform parts of the exorcism ritual. However, those reforms were largely ignored. Psychiatrists today agree that exorcism does far more psychological harm than good, Dunning said. Directed by Tobe Hooper, a popular screenwriter and producer, the 1977 horror film Eaten Alive follows the story of a Texas hotel owner who has a penchant for murder and feeds his victims to a large pet crocodile. The film is said to be inspired by Joe Ball, a bootlegger and alleged serial killer who operated the Sociable Inn in Elmendorf, Texas in the early 1900s. The DVD release also includes a mini documentary about Ball. Truth be told, the only similarity between Ball and his supposed movie counterpart Judd is that both men have an apparent affection for crocodilians. Ball, who kept a pond full of alligators next to his inn, committed suicide in 1938 after police questioned him about the disappearance of his wife and former girlfriend. A handyman who worked for Ball allegedly admitted to helping his boss dispose of the bodies of the two missing women and led police to their remains. It was known that Ball often fed animals to his gators, so police officers searched the pond but found no human remains. Despite the lack of evidence, rumors persisted that Ball had killed as many as 30 women and fed their bodies to his alligators. Released to theaters in 2002, The Mothman Prophecies follows John Klain, played by Richard Gere, as he leaves his Washington newspaper job to investigate sightings of winged creatures referred to as Mothmen in a small West Virginia town. The film claims to be based on actual events that occurred in Point Pleasant, West Virginia, between November 1966 and December 1967. Lauren Coleman, founder and director of the International Cryptozoology Museum in Portland, Maine, was a consultant during the production of the Mothman Prophecies. According to Coleman, the film, which is based on the 1975 book of the same name by parapsychologist John Keel, is a fictionalized narrative of actual events. The Mothman Prophecies is based in reality, but the film is director Mark Pellington's docudrama, fictionalized narrative motion pictures of the events, Coleman told HuffPost. The characters were created from parts of the personality and experiences of Keel. Even the character names are formed via movie script writers as puns. For example, Alexander Leak is Keel backwards. The 1979 film The Amityville Horror was about the Lutz family and the strange manifestations they allegedly witnessed when they moved into a New York home where a family was brutally murdered. The movie was based on a book of the same name that was published by Prentice Hall in 1977. The book included a series of intervallic scenes evocative of several successful horror films, most notably The Exorcist. Nonetheless, since its jacket was emblazoned with the words "True Story," the book was placed in the true crime section of bookstores around the world. Since that time, a number of other films about the story have been made. But is the story true? Yes, the film contains some fiction. But to be fair, the original book by Jay Anson also contained a healthy dose of fictional elements, exaggerations, and artistic license, said Dan Nolt, creator of AmityvilleFag.com. However, Nolt said, the fictional elements should not downplay the Lutz's real-life experiences, which included seeing phantom human-like apparitions, beds slamming up and down, and other paranormal events. Hollywood is out to make a good horror movie. I can't fault them for that. They are known for fictionalizing true life events. Frankly, in order to present a good, clear story, you must alter certain aspects. Unfortunately, many people have called the Lutz's story a hoax based on Hollywood's version of their story. They must remember that this film is not a documentary. A lot of the film is true to life, but some important parts are fiction, Nolt said. If you are a lover of horror films, you most likely seen the 1958 film, The Blob. If you haven't, put it in your Netflix queue. The independent film, which was Steve McQueen's debut leading role, is about a growing amoeba-like alien that comes to Earth from outer space and wreaks havoc on the small community of Downingtown, Philadelphia. The film was supposedly based on the reports about a mysterious gelatinous purple object that crashed in a farmer's field outside of Philadelphia in 1950. The discovery was noted in a New York Times article on September 28, 1950. According to the article, 2 Philadelphia police officers saw the object float down to Earth, but were unable to pick it up. The part touched by his hand dissolved, leaving a sticky, odorless residue. Within a half hour, the entire object had evaporated. A patrolman said, according to the news report, the FBI was notified, but when they went to examine the find, there was nothing left but a spot on the ground. Wes Craven's 1984 film A Nightmare on Elm Street is one of the most memorable horror films ever produced. The movie's primary antagonist, Freddy Krueger, is a quintessential boogeyman, a murderer who stalks his victims in their dreams and uses a glove fitted with razors for killing purposes. In 2012, the New York Times selected the film for inclusion in its list of the best 1,000 movies ever made. Was this disfigured serial killer actually inspired by real-life events? According to Craven, the answer is yes. It was a series of articles in the LA Times about men from South Asia who were from immigrant families and who had died in the middle of nightmares. One was the son of a physician. He was about 21. Everybody in his family said almost exactly these lines. "You must sleep." He said, "No, you don't understand. I've had nightmares before. This is different. He was given sleeping pills and told to take them. Everybody went to bed thinking it was all over. In the middle of the night, they heard screams and crashing. They ran into the room, and by the time they got to him, he was dead. They had an autopsy performed, and there was no heart attack. He just had died for unexplained reasons, Craven said in an October 2008 interview with Cinefantastique. According to Will Watson, administrator of Nightmare on Elm Street Films.com, Craven details the story about the men from Southeast Asia as well as other real-life inspirations behind the film in a 2010 documentary called Never Sleep Again, as well as other real-life inspirations behind the film in a 2010 documentary called Never Sleep Again, The Elm Street Legacy. Another Tobe Hooper film, 1974's The Texas Chainsaw Massacre, is about a group of friends who visit a house in which one of their relatives once lived and are hunted down by a chainsaw-wielding killer named Leatherface and his family of cannibals. The film was marketed as a true story and upon its release was banned in several countries due to numerous complaints about its violence. According to Michael Newton, author of the Encyclopedia of Serial Killers and numerous other true crime books, there is a bit of truth to the film. The movie is rooted in the real-life 1950s case of Wisconsin's Edward Jean. Crazy Ed, like Hooper's Leatherface character, wore the skinned-out scalps and faces of his victims and decorated his farmhouse with human remains. Newton said there is no proof that Jean indulged in cannibalism, but the suggestion is there. Arresting officers did find a victim's heart in a pan atop Jean's stove. He said when asked if he planned to eat it, Jean allegedly replied, "Do you think I'm crazy?" Jean's crimes are said to be the inspiration for several other films, including Psycho and The Silence of the Lambs. Within the similar vein of the Amityville Horror, the 2009 film The Haunting in Connecticut chronicles the experiences of a family that is exposed to supernatural behavior in their new home, which was a former mortuary. The film was inspired by events Carmen Reed and her family claim happened to them while living in Southington, Connecticut in the 1980s. There were a lot of things that were very accurate, but they also changed a lot of things around and turned it into Hollywood, Reed told HuffPost. One of the inaccuracies was a scene in the movie where a shower curtain nearly suffocates Reed's niece. What they portrayed was very accurate, but the shower curtain scene happened to me, not my niece, Reed said. The seance depicted in the movie also never occurred, but the exorcism of the demons was a reality, according to Reed. They were going for a PG-13 rating, so they couldn't put a lot of the events in there because they were more intense, Reed said. You can't talk horror films with a true film buff without The Exorcist coming up at some point in the conversation. The 1973 cult classic is about the demonic possession of a 12-year-old girl. It chronicles her mother's attempts to win back her child from the demon that possesses her through an exorcism conducted by two priests. According to Brian Dunning, host of the weekly podcast Skeptoid, there is some truth behind the scenes of the horror film. The movie was based on the actual case of an anonymous boy in 1949, given the pseudonyms Robbie Manham or Ronald Doe. Dunning told HuffPost the boy survived and went to have a normal life, largely because his case was not nearly as dramatic as what was depicted in the movie. Dunning said The Exorcist was not only inspired by an existing story, but was hugely influential for many other horror stories that followed. In the lawsuit seeking royalties following the success of the Amityville Horror movie, it came out that publisher Prentice Hall was actively looking for stories to ride the wave of popularity of The Exorcist. The judge even rebuked the Amityville Horror creators for writing fiction and for trying to copy The Exorcist, Dunning said.